Welcome to the Canny Conversations podcast. Conversations with a cause, with social entrepreneur Safaraz.
Hello and welcome to Canny Conversations with a Cause. These are conversations that we hope will captivate your curiosity cannily. And on the other side of the table, I've got Safaraz. Saf, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
And what have you been doing with yourself lately?
Well, you know that because we've been spending a lot of time together. Been going to events. We've been going to some networking events, some awards dinners, some private dinners as well. So we've spent quite a bit of time together.
We have indeed, yeah. And you've also been judging, haven't you? What have you been judging?
Judging quite a few things, actually. We've been judging for the Birmingham Awards, which I'm a big supporter of. Anything to do with Birmingham, particularly with business and enterprise and community sort of thing. So I've been lucky enough to be the head judge this time around, and been involved with the Birmingham Awards for around about 5 to 6 my 6th year. I've been involved with the National Apprenticeship Awards. Judging there, I've been doing a little bit of work on some of our own events, and Inda's event as well, the Natural Signature Awards, the London event, and so there's I would say about 4 or 5 awards that I'm involved with in a judging capacity. In addition to obviously the sponsorship they do and all the rest of it. Sorry to cut you in there.
I don't know how much sleep you get, Saf, but I imagine you probably don't get an awful lot of time to do things like sleep that us ordinary mortals do.
No.
Right. Today we're going to talk about trying to be a little bit less crazy. Now, what do we mean by that? I'm going to start by asking you a question. What do you think about the way that business is portrayed in the media? Things like the Alan Sugar program and in the soaps and that sort of thing. I mean, what do you think about the way that business people tend to be portrayed?
I think generally it's a negative. It's a negative connotation. I think you and I have discussed this a few times, and it's been a dinner table type conversation. If you mention entrepreneurship, fantastic. Everybody, thumbs up entrepreneurship. The single business owner, the hustle and all the rest of it. But when you mention business, people have a negative, I think, a connotation which revolves around profit, the hard done by employees. The cutthroat world of business, and particularly the you mentioned Alan Sugar and Apprentice. When they say it's not personal, it's just business, there's an element where anything is fair game for the pursuit of moving forward and getting ahead. So generally negative connotation. People think, I use the title CEO, but we're a SME business. People generally think fat cats, overpaid executives, and employees and staff are being taken advantage of, and the consumers are being taken advantage of, and all of this, there's a negative sense.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think the problem is that, let's cut to the chase. I think the general way in which business and business people are portrayed in the media is, to put it bluntly, they're not very nice people. If you look at The Apprentice, The Apprentice is not a business program. It pretends to be a business program. It's an entertainment show. And it's a long, long way from normal business. And you look at the way that business people are portrayed in, the soaps and drama. I'm going back a little bit now, I know, but I'm sure some people remember with Coronation Street a chap called Mike Baldwin, who used to run a factory, and he was a nasty piece of work. So what I'm really getting to, Saf, is one of the ways in which business is often portrayed in the media is that it's all hustle and bustle, and it's all rushing around, and it's all very dynamic, and it's all people making decisions and flying by the seat of their pants. And what we're going to talk about today is something which is much more real, I think, in terms of what everyday business people come across with, and that's a slog. That's taking your time. That's being less crazy, but making some good decisions. So let's just ask you what you mean by being less crazy.
So we in our business we use the word path less crazy, and obviously our company is called Pathway, and we play on that word path. path less crazy. And we say, well, smart people sometimes do crazy things or dumb things, and that's in terms of decision making. That's in terms of how they do things and how they react. And a lot of the time, it's about reflection. It's about accountability. It's being able to talk it out, really, rather than being in a position where it's all quick, pressured, wherever possible, to analyze, self-reflect, and work out, your hit rate in terms of decision making. So, I have a little bit of an exercise that I look at the sort of last 5 decisions that I've made, and I make a journal to say, if I had my way, and without my accountability partner, without discussing this, what would have been the implication of that? What decision would I have made? What would have been the ramifications of that? And potentially, what if that trajectory happened, where would I have been? So this is like sliding doors a little bit. And as a result of me changing my decision, my first decision or my first thought, my first thought, where am I now? And then looking at potentially what could have been. So it's, some people say, well, actually, what's happened has happened, and, there's no point discussing this or analyzing this. And I always look back and try and do that fairly regularly. I don't leave it too late or after the event, but in an element of a self-reflection. So we encourage this peer review. So what we have in our business is accountability partners, peer support. And this peer support network asks those questions. It's not necessarily it's not a coaching element. It's more in terms of just helping you with an element of self-reflection, because sometimes we find it hard to do so. But when you've got a meeting booked in with a peer and you're going to do an exercise to say, well, let's go through your last 5 or 3 actions. Where are you? How did that come about? What was the thinking process of it? What information did you have? What data did you have? And how did you come to that decision? And really, what was that your first thought, second thought? And how have you changed? So this is a sort of a complicated thing where we say, smart people often can make crazy decisions, can do some dumb things. And how do we get into a position where we get better at it?
Absolutely. And we learn from, the thing is, everybody who makes decisions will sometimes get them wrong, won't they? That's the way of the world. But, the important thing is to try to learn from the decisions. And I'm going to share with our listener a little secret. Well, it's a secret no longer. It won't be in a few seconds. Mr. Ali arrived here today telling us that he has 3 miles of petrol left in his car. And he also told us that on the way here, with running on fumes, he decided to go past the petrol station and not to fill up. So making decisions, I hope you've not got it wrong, or you could end up with quite a long walk home.
That is true. And I thought to myself, I'm usually late for these meetings that we have, and I don't want to be continuously late.
That's not the SAF people that know you know and love SAF.
No, so I thought to myself, the chances of me stopping, and I made an assumption, the fact that there probably is enough petrol in there, and it is a little bit of a risk, but it's not the chances of me failing, they're not consequential. So I thought, let's just get there, let's see what happens after the event, and then we'll take it from there. But you are right, that's probably not the best thing, but
such is Mr. Ali's passion for our podcast.
Yes, absolutely.
When we have the next issue, we will report back on whether he had to walk home or not.
Yes.
Saf, talk about the importance or otherwise of involving other people in decision making. I think you've said that within your group you have a process where you review decisions as a group. To what extent do you take into account other people's views? And I'll tell you something. I was listening fairly recently to Desert Island Discs on Radio 4 with Deborah Meaden, the entrepreneur, and the lady that most people know from Dragon's Den. And Deborah said that one of the greatest skills is to know what you don't know. And what she meant by that was if you don't know, then don't wing it, don't guess it, but ask the experts. So 2 questions, Saf. How important do you think it is to know what you don't know and to be prepared to take expert advice? And to what extent, when you're making decisions, do you take account of what other people think?
Yeah, I think first thing is, as soon as you mentioned you don't know what you don't know, I start thinking about Donald Rumsfeld, and that's automatically the whole sort of United Nations meeting, and he comes up with his speech, which if anybody hasn't seen that, it's worth Googling. And it is an element of being aware or being conscious, and partly my second thing that I keep thinking about is that the awareness, the raising of the awareness. So this is the reticular activation system. When say a colleague of yours buys a car, and I know you've bought a car recently. All of a sudden, I've started seeing all of these grey cars, very similar. I'm not going to mention your brand, but I start seeing all of these, and I thought, I'm sure there weren't that many because you've bought one. My awareness is now acute that I start seeing them on the road, and I see like 20, 30 in a day if I'm driving from one area of Birmingham to another, and that's part of this element of they were always there, but I didn't notice them before. And sometimes we don't notice these things, and it's an element where your awareness is raised, your consciousness is raised, and then you start picking these things up. But I think if any business person, entrepreneur, manager, leader is aware of the things that they don't know, they can deal with it. They can conquer it, they can look at it, they can have a plan. And it's the things that we don't know which are possibly the most dangerous things, because at least the things that we do know, we can have a plan. We can start identifying the risks, we can start evaluating, we can start implementing towards dealing with it, whatever that is. In terms of accountability and support and so forth, what I find is that when we make decisions or take actions, sometimes it's on the basis of generalizations. It could be assumptions, and the famous saying about assumptions makes a ass out of you and me, and that potentially is a risk there. Then you start obsessing over potentially the wrong thing, and because of that, you make the wrong decisions. And what you've got is, if you've got the right sort of accountability partner, you can sort of looking at, how did you come to that notion, that thinking? Is it based on some assumption? Is it based on data? Is it based on up-to-date data? How have you come to that realization? And, you find that is potentially these 3 categories really, whether it's generalizing, whether you're sort of focusing or obsessing over the wrong thing, or potentially the wrong assumptions. And these things can be diluted. You still have that element of potentially some bias there, but what you'll find is some of that can be taken away by the questioning, and you start coming into a little bit of a deeper thought process, deeper thinking. For me personally, and our organisation, I found it to be very useful. It's sometimes difficult to do it on your own, but in terms of actually saying it out, speaking it out, and being able to reflect on it, you tend to make better decisions. And what we find is that it's not necessarily what the other person says, but because of the process of talking it out and really explaining it, you come to a better formation of a view.
There are 3 points that perhaps I would like you to take up. The first one is something that we have talked about in the past, which is called confirmation bias, which is when you make a decision on your own, then sometimes we've actually made the decision. We might not admit it to ourselves, but we've made the decision, and we're actually looking for evidence that supports that decision. The other thing that I want to sort of raise, which I think is important, is there's a lot of, it's a bit of a buzz term, but evidence-based decision making. You make decisions based on the evidence and the information that's available to you. But the problem with that can be that you may have the evidence, you may have the information, but you may actually draw the wrong conclusions from that information. And the example that I've used in the past, and I continue to use because I think it's a really good one, is a few years ago, there was a report that came out that said if you're admitted to hospital on a Sunday, you are more likely to die than if you going to hospital on any other day of the week. And some people jumped up and down and said, oh, why is hospital so bad on Sunday? Why don't they have a proper level of care on Sunday? Why don't they have the good doctors in on Sunday? And what they completely forgot is the simple fact that normal hospital admissions do not take place on a Sunday. The people that go into hospital on a Sunday have either had an accident or they've been suddenly taken seriously ill. And therefore, people in those circumstances are more likely to die. And it's nothing to do with the level of care or not having the right doctors in place. So how, when you're making a decision, do you try to make sure that you're actually interpreting the evidence correctly? And is part of that involving other people who might be able to put a different perspective on things?
There's a colleague of ours, mine, that I remember a little while back. It's an ex-colleague. And he used the word logic a lot. And I used to say, well, everybody's logic is different. And your logic may not be the same as everybody else's logic, and your reasoning might not be the same. And what this colleague used to do is really conclude, used to use the evidence or the information in front of him to justify the decision that he wanted to make. And he was looking for the things that he wanted to look for. So you're not objective in your viewpoint. And, and that partly is life history in terms of, our thinking, our understanding really of things. And we have a perspective on things. So, there is going to be that. And again, it's our consciousness, is about our awareness, is being able to question ourselves that you get into a position. And we still make mistakes because, we buy things on emotion. We often do things on emotion. And we do things on the back of other things and so forth. And, we are, as I say, the catch-all title, we are human. And we, often make dumb decisions or stupid decisions and so forth. And that is that. But it's a matter of understanding that and being aware of that. And partly it's also the narrative. We had a budget a few weeks back, and people have the narrative that it's all whatever their narrative is. It's all bad or it's all good or this is what's happened. And it's our understanding. It's how we reflect on things and how we view things and what glass you're viewing it from. So it's difficult, isn't it? It's one of these which is independent. As long as you're aware of it, I don't think it's a big issue, but it's really being able to sometimes sit back and reflect and re-look at things and re-look at your reasons and if you can, be objective, which is difficult.
No, I mean, just for the benefit of our listeners, because one of the great benefits, of course, of podcasts is that people can pick them up at any point. And Saf was referring to the budget in November 2021. So that just gives you a bit of context if you're listening at another date. Another example of this, where isn't it very easy, Saf, to be rushed into something because it's the done thing and everybody thinks it's a great idea, and a bit like the old business of the emperor and his clothes. Everybody piles in behind a decision without really thinking it through. And I'm not asking you, well, you can do if you want to, but I'm not asking for your opinion on electric vehicles. But what I am suggesting is we've got this huge rush for electricity at the moment with vehicles. And I actually think that a lot of people can't see any further than the tailpipe. They don't recognise that, electric vehicles are hugely bad for the environment, with the mining of the materials needed for the batteries from environmental areas, with the exploitation that often goes into that. And also the fact that electricity doesn't come from thin air. It has to be generated. Unless you can generate that electricity sustainably, then you're having to use fossil fuels to generate it. Now, I'm not suggesting that we get into a debate about the merits or otherwise of an electric vehicle. But what I am saying, Saf, in terms of the decision-making, how do you make sure that you avoid getting caught up in a maelstrom of, a particular idea which sounds brilliant without it being really thought through, which is what, in my view, is happening with this dash for electricity?
I think this is where your peers, again, I'm going back to the peers and the support sort of network. I mean, I use the phrase, help me understand this. And I use that quite a bit in my conversations, and I come across, often quite dumb But what I try and do is get them to explain. And what you find is, you don't have to say much, but just get them to say, can you help me understand this? And that starts it off. What you find is, they go through their generalizations, they go through the reasons why, they have an effort, and you can start seeing whether they're trying to persuade you or whether they're trying to get you to understand. And then if they are trying to persuade you, you go back to say, well, let's try and understand this, or help me understand this. And what I find is that none of your staff members, they're there for the right reasons. They want to be successful. They want to align with your values. They want to add value, and they're there. But they have their own beliefs. They have their own perspectives, and it's being able to sort of correlate that. And what you find is sometimes the decision makes itself based on the questions, and it can be very frustrating. It's like sometimes a child, and I don't want to do it like a child that keeps saying why. But what you find is that if you can delve a little bit deeper, ask the supplementary question, go past the first level of information, second level and third, and then you might find, you're closer to making a better decision. And what happens is at the first level, when there's somebody tries to summarize it, they summarize things with their own viewpoint, their own, their own narrative on it, and then what you find is that you get to a position where it is better. In terms of, the whole carbon conversation and, electric and so forth, people have this thing that they want to do the right thing, that they also have this thing that they want to contribute, and everything counts. And we start believing the narrative. Nobody goes into the levels of details that you're talking about, but we have this general assumption. And if it makes them feel good, if they feel that they're contributing, they feel that they're a better person, I don't see anything wrong with it as such. But it is an element of, this is human nature. It is an element of, people think that they're contributing to society, they're causing less damage, they're having their role, and they want others to do so. And rightly or wrongly, our assumptions over a period of time, we know have proven wrong. But that happens over sometimes decades. We don't get to know some of the things that we as citizens have done, have made, until after the event. And then you come to the realization that maybe it wasn't the right thing. But for now, this is where the momentum is. This is where the focus is. The government targets are there. Whether it happens or not, that's a different thing. But generally, what you find is that that's what people are doing. What you also find is that, I mentioned to you the budget, and quite rightly you mentioned the date, November 2021. But this budget also has indication of what government policy is. So government policy not only will try and direct that momentum, but there's a narrative there. There's where the news is going to be, and you'll find there's an element where the budget will try and propel that government narrative and the agenda, whether that's through subsidies or whether that's through other means. And it's there. It is just one of those things. You can say as much as you want in terms of, well, it's not logic, but I think it's going to be hard for people to listen to, because that's where the momentum is, and that's what's been built over a period of time, I think.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Saf. I mean, I was listening to our Prime Minister this morning saying that it was 1 minute to midnight when it came to saving the environment.
This is very similar to the oven-ready deal.
It's 1 minute to midnight, but that didn't stop him flying from London to Cornwall when the world leaders came to this country. And the other possibility, of course, in terms of environmental causes, we could all follow the example of His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales and convert our Aston Martins to run on fine wine and cheese, which I understand is what it's done. I'm not sure whether that's a practical solution for most people. But finally, I'm of an age, you're younger than me, Saf, but I'm of an age, when I was a little boy, I was really taken in by the Apollo program and getting to the moon. And Apollo 13, they had an explosion on the way to the moon. One of the oxygen tanks exploded. And one of the legendary flight controllers, a chap called Gene Kranz, was in charge at that time. And these guys were they were fighting for their lives. But he said to his team, "Hang on, guys, slow down, work the problem. Don't let us do anything that makes it worse." And in terms of decision making and the business that we've talked about, people being under pressure to make decisions and do it quickly. I mean, how often when you've got a crisis to deal with in your business, do you find yourself saying to the team, "Hang on, guys and gals, let's slow down, let's work the problem," because it's very easy to make a decision that actually not only doesn't help, but makes things worse.
I think when you're in a meeting, Adrian, and people get carried away, you do sometimes focus, and you lose focus in terms of what your end is, what your objective is. And sometimes it's a good thing to say in a meeting, let's just slow things down and what are we trying to achieve here? And that element of just saying that in a meeting does get impact. And if you're trying to say, well, what are we trying to achieve, or what's our objective, what's our goal, what you find is that people do reflect. And what you find is that some of the conversations that you've had, or some of the points that you've had, have gone completely off on a tangent, or possibly irrelevant, and you're going into a bit of a debate and you're losing focus. So work the problem, or work out what your solution is, or what your objective is. More importantly, I think is something to reflect on, because we can easily get carried away. We can get carried away with the conversation. How people speak or what have they said. We might go in and often in meetings, people like to impress with their knowledge and start bringing in other things which are not necessarily relevant or directly attributable to the point that they're trying to make. So it is, I think, important just to have that element of, let's go back to what we're trying to achieve here. What's our goal? What's our end in mind? And let's work backwards. And that always does, I think, get people back on the track. I've said before, we often do make bad decisions or wrong decisions and stupid decisions. And, business can be one bad decision away from a disaster. You want to improve your chances of
There's
success.
There's an old-fashioned saying, sleep on it. And it's not always possible to sleep on it, because if you wake up in the middle of the night and the house is on fire, sleeping on it, what you're going to do is not the greatest idea in the world. But generally speaking, in my experience, don't make a decision when you're tired and emotional, or you're stressed, or you're upset, or in the dark hours of the night. I mean, I don't know whether you agree with that.
Yeah, generally, yes, Adrian. I mean, but what I would also say is that I'll tell you where I often say that is it's not necessarily about decisions or issues. It's when people bring other ideas to the table, and we should do this or we should do that and so forth. And it's where you've got sort of distraction taking place. And and we go back to the analogy in terms of putting all your eggs in one basket. And I say, well, actually, there's not a bad thing in terms of putting all your eggs in one basket, as long as you're keeping a very close eye on that basket. So sometimes the implementation of it, the monitoring of what we're doing is probably key.
Yeah, well, we now have to make the decision to bring this Canny conversation to a close. I hope people have enjoyed listening. If they have, we hope they'll share, that they'll like, and let us have feedback. So until next time, thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to this Canny Conversation with a Cause. These conversations are based upon the Canny Bites books by Safaraz Ali, available on Amazon. To find out more, go online and visit Saf's website, pathwaygroup.co.uk, or join him on social media. He can be contacted at safraz@pathwaygroup.co.uk.